is Edward talking with Thương again. We're doing part 2 of student life, aren't we?
Yes.
How are you today?
Yes, I'm good. I'm so thrilled to be on here again for part 2.
Yeah, well, we had a good talk before about student life, and we finished talking about a book that inspired you to study better. And we talked a little bit about, sort of reading, a little bit about reading in general, how students today don't read very much. But you are a reader, and I'm a reader. So I thought we would then talk a little bit more about books, students and books, not just general student life.
Yeah, it's something that you expect that to go together, but in the situation here, it's very odd. Like, students nowadays only limited to a few sorts of bestseller book, and they just read that and then, or they just don't read anything at all.
Yeah, what do you think? Well, why do you think that is?
I think the most reason is they don't have the right expectation about books, and they don't know how to read a book correctly.
Right.
Like, there's actually a way that you can optimize your reading and then get the most out of it. And it can keep going like forever.
Right.
And because I got it, I think I got it right from the beginning. So I'm really confident about I can just read for the rest of my life now.
Yeah. So let me ask you, why do you read?
I read. It changed from time to time. So before I was reading to get more knowledge, to learn things that I haven't known. And it's very I just the title of the book is like self-help book. It sounds very tempting. It's like, oh, you can get better just by after this book. You can get this skill. You can get this emotion intelligence, and it's you far in life. So it's really beneficial. But now I'm currently focused on what I really like. I want to read literature and philosophy mainly. So I move away from self-help, but I still come back to some good title that really scientifically correct.
Right.
I think it's also a reason because of the marketing by some of the few big companies that are selling book right now. They the recommendation, like there's so many like title and genre you can find in the world, and you can when you walk in a Western bookstore, you can choose what you like, and you open to a lot of selection. But here in Vietnam, most bookstores just filled with self-help and then some other happy. Right. And it just, and people only can get upset to that, and they didn't like it, and so they say, oh, so book only like this is very unrealistic, and they don't want to learn more about it because they miss out on what book is really like, and this can help you. Yeah.
I think too, there's just so many demands that are put on people now too. To follow people on social media, to follow, even studying, I think is more demanding now than it used to be, perhaps. But now, when I was a student, and even when I was a young adult, it was if I had some free time, I would walk into a bookstore and just spend a lot of time just going through the bookstore and looking at books and say, oh, this is an interesting cover, or this is an interesting title, or this is an author. Oh, I didn't know they wrote this book too. Let me check it out. So it would be a very common thing for me and many people in my age group to just, find a book at a bookstore or at the library. And that would be, how we would spend some extra time if we had free time. But now I think people have like a smartphone. They can browse the internet. They can look at different things and check out what's, news or things. So, I didn't have those options, but I still, heavily value the books that I read. And I think it's a shame that people don't have that. But I don't know what the answer is. So what are some of the books that you're reading now, Tuong?
For now, what I'm reading now is the biography of Virginia Woolf.
Oh,
I
okay.
read Orlando and I really liked it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so now I'm continuing with a very hard one, Miss Dalloway, but it's really hard to get into.
Yeah.
I don't know. It can be like what first 100 page, I couldn't get anything out of it at all. But then the next 50 page, I get a glimpse of what inside, and then I lost it. So I think it needs a second read.
Sometimes you have to just go, sometimes you have to go back to it. I had a hard time. I still have a hard time reading Virginia Woolf, but she's one of the greats. She was one of the greats, but I never was able to, I was never able to get into that. How many books do you read in a year?
Actually, I just checked it the other day with my Goodreads. I use that to manage my books that I read. So this year I set a challenge of 40 books this year, but I passed that number. I reached 49 now.
Wow, you are so far above. You are so far above average. I think even worldwide.
Yeah, because I cheat sometimes, but mostly I still like to read very much, so it can be count as 40, I guess.
Right, but how do you cheat reading a book?
I read a very short one that should not be counted as it still have on Goodreads, but it should not count as a really top read. It's just
okay, just like a short thing. Yeah,
it's like
about a book that influenced me a lot when I was a student, and that was called Catch-22. It's a book by Joseph Heller, and everybody in my generation read the book. I mean, everybody. This was back in it was written in the 1950s, I think, but it remained popular for a long time. So I was going to school in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and everybody in my generation had read the book. So you could basically, meet somebody and start talking about the book and assume that they would know it. And that by itself is an experience you don't have very much anymore. In the United States, no, and here in Vietnam, I don't think so either, with maybe a few exceptions.
Yeah, but we also have some reference from some of the title in the book that we have to learn at school, so we can talk about it.
That's true. Yeah, no, that's true. There's some books that everybody has to study, but this was not a book that people had to study in school. This was a book that people just read because it was interesting. Maybe a little bit like if there's a very popular movie right now or a very popular Netflix show and everybody is talking about it. It's the same thing. We would talk about, books that everybody just assumed that the person you're talking to read it. And that was nice. And I miss that because we don't have that experience so much anymore. But in my generation, Catch-22 was, a very influential book. And it was written as a satire on authority, a satire on war, and a satire on, on things that society told us we had to take seriously. But the book was telling us we did not have to take it seriously. So I guess it was a little bit of I don't know, what would I call it? It would be a kind of underground. Yeah, a little bit rebellious, but it was a bestseller, so everybody knew it. But
everybody was a rebel,
right? Maybe. Well, I think the culture was more, allowed that more. Nowadays, I don't think that there's, a rebellious culture. I don't think is valued very much. We have rebels, of course, but we don't all look up to them. And that's a little bit different right now and how things were. But no, it's, my son and then people who went to school after I did, as you observe in Vietnam, just started reading more self-help books. How to improve yourself, how to improve your resume, how to be more successful in a career.
how to influence people and win.
How to influence people so that you win. Yeah, yeah.
7 Habits of Successful Team.
That's right. That's right. And you know, we had a few of those, but they weren't. They became popular after I went to school. So when we first started seeing self-help books, I thought they were just kind of, you know, I thought they were kind of stupid. I thought, oh, you know, but they're popular and lots of people read them. But you know, the same way, you know, you made me think about my student life, Thương, when we were talking before, because it was such a long time ago. But there were so many people in school that were studying with me that, like I said, we studied humanities, we studied literature and history and arts and you know, the classics, and we weren't expected to have school tell us what our career was going to be. School was just going to give us a general education to understand, you know, the world and our time in history and, you know, the promise of tomorrow and the lessons from yesterday, and think for ourselves, and then, you know, and then the career and the job will come along. But after I went to school, that started changing quickly. You know, so now it's, you go to school to get better at your job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I have something to say about self-help book, because I used to be an anti-self-help book, because it just, when you get enough of some of that, you get the gross feeling about, oh, it's just bullshit. It's just about, getting rich and compared to the other, and then the time management. But after reading a few of the book, and I have some methods that I have to choose which is a good one that's worth your time to read it.
Right.
So with Goodreads you can have some rating. So you should not read some book that really have low score than 4, because they have a 5-star rating system. So you should choose one that reliable, and then have some good review from your friend that. And then something that you generally think that is really good for you. Because some of the few ones that I read this year on that category really helped me in my life, and it's improved me to live a good life.
What are some, are you going to tell us some examples? Yeah,
it's 23 anti-procrastination habit, how to stop being lazy and get results. It's just very random and long title.
That sounds very good. Yeah.
So very.
So did it help? Did reading that book help you not to procrastinate?
I still do. I still procrastinate, but it does help me acknowledge my habit and how I can shape my own habit and my action. What's causing me to do the thing that not really benefit for me.
Right. So you understand it better.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. I think that's helpful, because it's hard to change who you are, right? It's hard for a person to change who they are deep down, but the more you understand what the problem might be, that's helpful. Oh, that's
I think productivity is like a learnable skill. People can really give you experience from how you can optimize habit from seeing other successful people. Right. So I think it's not a bad thing wanting to be better.
No, definitely not. And I just sometimes get into not an argument, but a discussion with people who don't read, because I think that, you know, good literature can do the same thing or even do it better than a self-help book. Because if there's characters that you follow in a story that help you understand, you know, they face problems and they deal with problems, or they make good decisions and bad decisions, and in the outline of the story you see the outcome, you have lessons that you learn. So I think my habit of reading has made me a better person. And it's a kind of self-help book, because, you know, the story, a good, powerful story is going to show me, you know, how to be a better person. And if the character in the book is not all characters in books are good people, but even if it's a bad character, you might learn from them. But it's a losing battle. I never win the battle. When I talk about, how good it is to read literature and read stories, if I'm talking to somebody who doesn't read, I never win that battle. I don't convince people to read.
I have this book called Who Moved My Cheese. It's our cheese, the title, but it's actually good. And I don't know. I used to look at it like I overlook it. It's just like, it's just a simple book to tell you some productive stuff and then just succeed, make money. But it actually just tell you to give up on the old things so you can move on to the new thing. It's just simple as that. But it's they make it into a short story about cheese and mouse. But it's after reading a lot of psychology book, I can tell you that it's psychologically it's true that that's how you change your habit and to achieve new goal in your life. So so I think it's good and bad. People also talk bad about that book, but I think they use that the wrong way, and maybe they have the wrong expectation, and then they don't get it the wrong time because they are maybe in the good place now. They don't need to change, so they see that the book is just a waste.
Right. No, it's about I guess it's about what you put into it. What you're willing to put into it, and what you're willing to learn.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you open your mind to some ideas that you maybe not like a little bit, and then you just endure that kind of feeling, and then maybe at some point you might think, oh, this is actually good. I finally get it. Why people like it so much.
So Tuan, we've talked a lot about sort of in general about how to read and the benefits of reading and what. Why don't we close tonight's discussion with a recommendation for our listeners to read something? So can I ask you to go first?
Yes, very gladly. Okay. Yes, just have been a book that I have been recommend everybody I know when they ask me, oh, what should I read? Give me some title. And this is the first one that comes to mind always. It's called Sapien, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. He's a Jewish. So this is an anthropology book. It's about the history of the development of everything related to our kind, from the Stone Age to what we are right now with all the religion and then all the science. So as a human, I think we should learn about our own kind, our being a human. Why are we here? Like most of it, maybe not really question or have a source to learn about that.
I think that book has been translated into many languages also.
Yeah, and they even make a comic version, so it can get access to many people. I think it will stay, but it has been bestseller in Amazon for years. So I think it's going to keep it the same way. So if you haven't read that, go get it right now, I think. Okay,
I will. And my book, it's very kind of similar to Sapiens, and I have read Sapiens, and I recommend that. But the book that I recommend is called Galapagos, and it was written, it's back in my generation, so it's old, but it's one of those books that I keep thinking back on. And it's also about people. It's about Sapiens, but it's written as a novel. The author is Kurt Vonnegut, and Kurt Vonnegut was one of my generation of Americans, one of the heroes, literature heroes of my generation of Americans. And the title is Galapagos, and it's about people. You might know that Galapagos are the islands off of South America where there's they've done a lot of scientific studies about the development of species and animals, and Charles Darwin, because the islands are very remote. So it's interesting to study evolution. And this book is about evolution, but in a literary form. It tells a story about the tiny cells that become slightly larger and slightly larger and slightly larger and become people. But the story is not only about evolution, but about regression, about how at some point people become so stupid that they start going backwards and backwards and backwards, and suddenly they are back to being the small little cells. So it's satire. It's similar to the book that I talked about earlier, Catch-22. That satire was a very big part of our generation, where we learned to laugh at ourselves and not take ourselves too seriously. And this is kind of looking at human beings and the evolution of human beings, similar to how Sapiens approaches it, but this is with a more satirical and maybe funny approach. But the literature is great. Not a lot of people read it, but there's a small group of followers who love it very much, and I'm one of them. Thương, thank you very much. It's been so much fun to talk about student life and student reading, and you have helped me remember my student days and the books that I read when I was a student. And happy reading to you.
Yes, thanks for having me here on the show. I'm really have a fun time doing this.
Always. Okay. Thank you and goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.